Hello and welcome to episode 4 of What's Tom Reading? I'm Tom, and this week I'm talking about I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the show. You guys, I Am Legend is an incredible book. And first, before I jump into that, I wanted to thank you guys. I have had, I've shared this podcast. So you're getting episode 4. And the way that I decided to do this is I decided to record the first 3 episodes kind of in advance, just so that there's kind of a backlog of the show that people can listen to. And so episode 4 is the first one that I'm doing public. But I tested it a little bit and I got some awesome feedback from my awesome wife who she told me that I need to slow down and I need to take a little bit more time to enunciate, to form my sentences, and to think through what I'm going to say instead of just piling through. And it's good advice. I went back and listened to those episodes and I do sound a little bit frantic. I apologize for that. I'm extremely excited about these books and sometimes I let that run away with me. So I will be working on that. This is new to me, right? This performance thing. And it's weird because I'm just sitting in a quiet room right now, just talking about books to this microphone. And I don't know who you are out there, dear listener. I do know that the first few episodes of this podcast have already gotten like a really, I think, kind of surprising number of views based off of the fact that I haven't shared it. It's been downloaded a number of times. And for those of you who have listened, thank you so much. For those of you who are checking out this first 4th episode, I really, really appreciate it. Giving the show a chance, giving it a shot. I'm passionate about this. I'm going to keep it coming. I love to read. I love to review these books. And I realize now that this episode 4 kind of, me introducing the podcast is going to sound really weird to those of you who have listened to 1, 2, and 3, but this is going to have a slightly different flavor. That said, I'm done talking about that now. I must talk about the book, I Am Legend. I finished it today and I rushed home in the rain. So if you catch me sniffling a little bit, it's because it's freezing cold. I rushed home in the rain to be able to talk to you guys about this book. I loved it. It was amazing. And I'm going to break from protocol a little bit here as far as spoilers. And I'm going to do that because I Am Legend was written, like I said, by Richard Matheson back in 1954. This book is almost 70 years old. So I guess I consider that long enough that I'm not as obligated to avoid spoilers because there's some really, really cool takeaways from this really old book. And many of you have probably seen the Hollywood adaptation with Will Smith, which is awesome and fun. And, you know, it's a Hollywood shoot 'em up and Will Smith is incredible as always. So I Am Legend, the book, is different. And it's different in a few key ways. And the reason I decided to read this book, it's been on my list for a long time. It's been on my list since high school when a really good friend of mine read it and recommended it. And I'm just now getting around to it. And the reason I didn't pick it up was because I was like, 1954, old. And at the time I was really into sci-fi, like spaceship sci-fi. This is sci-fi. And I realized I did a Jurassic Park one. So I'm doing non-traditional science fiction. And I'm a big spaceship guy. If I'm honest, I'm really big into spaceship sci-fi. So for me to do 2 of these non-standard sci-fi books, or non-space spaceship or sci-fi books, excuse me, I'm losing it. For me to do 1 of these or 2 of these, it says a lot about the quality of the books that they're the ones that I'm so eager to talk to you guys about. So, I Am Legend. Let me give you some of the background of this book. So it's a dystopian novel, which means that the world has ended, and the main character, Robert Neville, he's, as far as he knows, the last man on Earth, and he has to survive because everyone else on Earth has been transformed into vampires, and they're kind of similar to what you would picture as a vampire, at least what you would have pictured as a vampire before Twilight came out and ruined vampires for everyone forever. That's a book that I will not be reviewing, by the way, because I haven't been able to make it past the first chapter. Quality of writing is a big issue for me. And while I know Twilight has been a huge hit for a lot of people, and I know and love people who loved those books, I'm not trying to yuck your yum here. I'm just saying I couldn't get through it. There's a funny little clip that I saw on TikTok of someone reading Twilight, going back to Twilight as an adult, having been in love with the book as a kid, and just noticing that the author uses the word chuckled just a crazy amount. And so the video goes through and is chuckled darkly, chuckled lowly, chuckled. And man, nobody ever laughs. They only ever chuckle in Twilight, and stuff like that bugs me. So I will not be reviewing Twilight unless you guys really, really, really want me to read it. And then maybe I'll do like a viewers or listener's choice special. But please don't force me to read that book. I'm not interested. Anyways, these vampires in I Am Legend, they are more like old Dracula vampires, and kind of, I guess it fits because this book was written, just after World War II. And so there's that kind of like, cape wearing Count Dracula, blood sucking kind of vampire trope, afraid of crosses and garlic and things like that. And these vampires are more similar to that, but what's kind of behind it is super cool. It's a sci-fi, new agey kind of take where the vampires have been infected by a bacillus, a bacteria that has caused them to mutate. Basically, it's like a parasite that's changed the behavior of the host, which is in this case we're humans, changed the behavior to benefit the parasite's needs. But it's a bacteria, and it's infected these vampires or these people and turned them into vampires. So they're allergic to the sun. They can only come out at night, and they're in a coma during the day. They have to sleep, and they can't wake up. Even if you go and mess with them, they don't wake up. And that's crucial to the plot. They're also afraid of garlic because garlic, for some reason, that is it's pseudoscientific, and it's been enough years now. Richard Matheson is an awesome author, and he did a lot of work to make the science in this sci-fi novel sound believable. The garlic one was a little bit of a stretch, but basically it causes anaphylaxis, right? The vampires are allergic to garlic, and the allergy is only brought on by the smell of the garlic. At one point, he tries to inject garlic juice into a vampire's butt while she's asleep. And she's fine. I know. I just realized how weird that is, given the early exposure that you guys are having to this book. That Robert Neville, our main character, would inject garlic juice into a girl's butt. But trust me, it was on point. It was for science. Okay. So these vampires, they're also afraid of crosses, but the reason that they're afraid of crosses is because there's a part of them that's still human, and it's a psychological element of the crosses, right? The vampires that were not Christians, for example, Jewish people who were transformed into vampires, they are not afraid of crosses. Atheists who were transformed into vampires, not afraid of crosses. So the idea is that legend developed because vampires were primarily a European affliction, and Europe was at the time mainly Catholic, right? So that's why the vampires were afraid of crosses then, and that's why the vampires in this story, at least a good chunk of them, are afraid of crosses as well. As there's that human element that kind of expects to be afraid of crosses, or expects to have that be a part of their vampire psychology. So there's an element of like, yes, the bacteria has taken them over, but there's like some of the host is still there inside. And the way that that's reflected in the story is that some of these vampires talk. And it's spooky. There's a vampire that was Robert Neville's friend that he used to carpool with back in the day before the apocalypse. And this guy, Ben, he goes to Robert's house every night and he goes, "Come out, Neville, come out," and he just taunts him all night long until the dawn, and then goes and hides back in his spooky hiding place. And he's able to talk. And the vampires, they try all these ways. Like the lady vampires try to seduce him to come out, and they try to threaten him. They try to scare him. They throw rocks at his house. For some reason, they don't really have a good they don't have good brains, right? They're not super smart. They mostly, I guess their hunger drives them to being like really primal and dumb. There are smart vampires, and we'll talk more about those in a little bit. But basically that's kind of the premise of the book, right? Is that Robert Neville, he's living in this world of vampires, and he has to survive. And so he boards himself into his house at night, and he can hear them screaming and howling and taunting and jeering and seducing. And they're all trying to get him out of his house at night so that they can kill him and drink his blood, because the bacteria compels the host to drink human blood, I guess. But what's interesting about this take on vampires is that when the dawn comes, they all have to, like regular vampires, I guess, they're afraid of the sun. They die if they're exposed to the sunlight, because the sunlight kills the bacteria. Again, a little bit of a reach, scientifically speaking, but good, right? Oh, and he stakes them in order to kill them. And it's not like he can't shoot them to kill them because the bullets get stuck in their body glue, which is, again, another scientific reach. Okay. This is not, if you're into like science fiction that sounds plausible, this is not exactly the best. It might have been in 1954, but kind of the distance that we've covered in like basic high school biology, and, you know, most people would not find the science of this super compelling. But anyways, he stakes them through the heart, and that kills them as well. So basic vampire stuff. All of the legends are kind of incorporated into this, except for they don't turn into bats, and that's the main one. So anyways, during the day, these vampires, they go into a coma, and they crawl away into some dark place or in some house where they aren't exposed to sunlight, and then they go to sleep and they can't wake up. They're in a coma. It's not just sleep, it's a coma. So they're laying there and they're breathing heavily, and it's because the bacillus requires them to rest periodically, or they'll die. And so they end up going to, it's not just sleep, it's like a survival kind of induced coma, a stasis, so that the body can heal enough to go out at night again. So our main character, Robert Neville, jumps in his trusty station wagon, and, you know, station wagons, there's something that kind of went away. Oh, I guess they still have Subaru things, but it's just not the same as like those big chunky wagons. Anyways, he has this trusty station wagon that he rolls around town in, and he picks up canned foods and his groceries and his tools and everything like that, whatever he needs in order to make things happen. And while he's out, he goes house to house and just slaughters these vampires in their sleep, just murders them. Not murders. He doesn't think it's murder anyways. He's killing these creatures of the night because during the day they're helpless. And so he goes house to house and butchers them, all of them. And after a little while, he starts to kind of experiment on them to see, like I said, like the garlic juice in the butt, right? And he drags some of them out into the sunlight and watches them shrivel and shriek in the sunlight. And he's like, interesting, very science, very cool. But what he doesn't realize, and what is kind of central to the story, is that these creatures are sentient. And at nighttime, they're out and alive. That's when they're alive and awake. And then during the day, that's their nighttime, right? And they go to sleep, and they are terrified of him. They are so afraid of him. They hate him, and he will come into their home and torture and maim and kill them. He starts chopping parts of them off to see what will happen. He's scientifically trying to figure out what makes these zombies tick, or is not zombies. Forgive me. The movie I Am Legend portrays them as zombies. These are vampires for sure. He's trying to figure out what makes these vampires tick. So he's performing all these scientific experiments. And they are unethical because these are not humans anymore, but they are humanoid, human-like. They have human feelings, including fear and hunger. And he totally misses this. He's he feels like the last man on earth. He's fighting for his survival. He's fighting to be able to live another day. And he dreams of meeting up with other humans who are still alive. And over time, he kind of starts to realize that that's just not happening. He goes a few years living on his own in the world full of vampires. And so that's the plot of the book. And there's some really, really cool stuff. The storytelling is amazing. And so I guess we'll jump into our regular format now that you know the book and now that I've talked about it. And I hope you're really interested in it. Please, if you haven't read it, go read it. I'm spoiling some of it here, but I'm not spoiling it enough to where like seeing his process and how he does these things and the way that the author describes them, it would still be super worth it for you to go out and do it. Get the book, read it. It's a fairly short read, actually. It only took me a day to read this one. So, jump in, make it happen, read the book. What I liked about this book, I loved the style. And it's surprising to me because the reason I didn't pick it up originally was because I thought, it's old. It's really old. It's like a 70-year-old book. I've read older books. I've read books from that kind of time period, and I find them just kind of tedious, like the style of writing, the pace of writing. I'm a young gun millennial, I guess, where I'm like, give it to me now, give it to me fast, right? Like I want my plot to be rich and full, and the setting to be rich and full. And authors back then they really took their time, right? But not this guy. This author, it feels I Am Legend reads like a short story that got out of control. And that is that checks out because Matheson was known largely for his short stories. He was a screenwriter as well, worked on some Hollywood horror movies, big into horror. And this is his main success story, this book. And so I loved the pacing. I thought it was really, really on point. He didn't waste time. He didn't waste words. He was very descriptive about the environment, but not tediously so. Like he gave you enough for you to feel like you were in it, and you feel, but like at a pace that made you feel like things were happening and the story was moving along quickly. And I loved that. In fact, I adored that. The pacing of this book, surprisingly to me, was some of the better pacing I've seen in a book. And he didn't waste my time. And that sounds like such an obnoxious thing to say as a reader. And I apologize if any of you are offended. I know there are people out there who like the long reads and the deep meat and the Dostoevsky. Someday I will read Dostoevsky. But I regret to say that it's probably not going to make it onto this podcast very soon, because every time I try and pick it up, I'm like, oh, this is above my pay grade. This is the kind of book that I need to not have that much else going on in my life when I sit down and read this. This is for like I don't know, like a week in winter or something like that. Maybe I'll bust out the Dostoevsky and get it going. I've tried a few times to start, and it just it really quickly evolves into like, wait, I definitely missed some information back there. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. And then, I know my taste will change. My palate is evolving as I get older. So eventually I'll be able to read the high-minded literature and get there with those of you out there who are into that type of thing. But for me, I like the delivery to be quick. I like the payoff to be, consistent. And I'm not super interested in the idea of waiting for 30 hours of you telling me the particular shade of some particular side character's shirt. I want to get to the story, and that works great in this book. In I Am Legend, the author is amazing at that. And also he paints a very vivid picture of despair. Like you really, really feel Robert Neville's despair, and it's kind of old timey. So the values are a little bit old school, but I like that. I think that's pretty cool too. A little glimpse into, that time in history. He's a man's man, and he's got this, do it yourself, this fix it, this, a man's world, a man's role. Like, it's not the most enlightened approach, but it's very, it feels it feels very realistic. Robert Neville, above all, feels like a man in his time who's trying to deal with the end of the world. And I like that. I like that glimpse back into, the 1950s, a guy just trying to make it happen and survive the apocalypse. Very cool. So I liked the pacing, and I got to tell you guys, and I'm not going to spoil everything. Okay. But I loved, and I'll say it one more time. I loved the ending of this book. And if you've seen the Will Smith movie, you know that Robert Neville does not survive to the end of the story. You know that. So I'm not spoiling anything. And you know, if you're smart, you know that the last man on Earth doesn't live happily ever after, right? Like, that's, the world ended and it's full of vampires now. Something's got to give, and it's probably not going to be the vampires. So we find out that there's this new society of vampires that's kind of coming about, and he has these companions throughout, just like Will Smith does. He runs into a dog that he tries to befriend and loves. He runs into a woman that he tries to befriend and loves. And no spoilers as to what happens to the dog or the woman, but I think maybe you can read between the lines, and maybe you've seen, the Will Smith version. The ending to the book is not as Hollywood as the movie. Will Smith dies in, I think, a fiery explosion to save a woman and child who are going off to live with a colony of survivors. That's cool. That's great. That's super Hollywood. Amazing. But this story does not end that way, because there is no colony of survivors in this book. He's the last. He's the literal last of the humans. And so he gets brought in by this new society of vampires who they bring him in so that they can have a public execution. They capture him and drag them and hold him in this jail cell right at the end of the book, so they can have this public execution of him. And the beauty of the way that this book ends, and again, apologies for spoiling this, but you have to hear it. You have to hear it, and then you have to actually go read the book, because experiencing it is better than hearing it from me. But hopefully this is just a primer for you, so that you can put it on your list and be like, yes, I need to read this book. And you do, right? I don't have enough time to give this book the justice that you would get from it, from reading it yourself. But at the end, he has this reflection on what he's been doing over the last few years, right? He's been holed up in his lair during what they consider the day, and the villagers with their pitchforks are going out to get him, and he's there in his lair and they can't get to him. He's defended in there. And then during the day, which, remember, is the night for the vampires when they're asleep, during the day, he sneaks into their homes and he carries them off and he tortures them and he maims them and he kills them and he injects garlic juice into their butts. He realizes at the end of the story that he has become the monster. He's the monster. Right. And that's what I Am Legend. That's where the title comes from. That's the last line of the book. He says, I am legend. I'm the monster. I'm the vampire now. It's me. Society, evolution has moved on without me. I am the monster. They hunted me down, brought me into this jail, and they are going to execute me so that their people can sleep safely at night, not afraid anymore. And oh my goodness, my mind was blown. Your mind will be blown as well. This is a good book with a good story, and it made me think for sure. Like, normal and what's right is a lot of times kind of the perception of a crowd, right? It's a majority affair. That's what he says in the book. Normal is a majority affair, and the vampires are normal, and he is the monster who comes at night. And oh man, very cool, very thought-provoking, amazing ending. That's what I loved about the book. I am going to move over to the corners now, and then I'll come back with what I didn't love about the book. But I'm going to warn you guys, I did not put this book down. I read it in a day, as I said, and at the end of the book, my mind was blown. My mind exploded, and so there's not a lot that I don't like about this book. So that section of this show is going to be real short. I have a couple of things, but man, oh man, was this a good book. If put it on your list right now. Seriously, get it. Yeah, nothing else to say about that. Let's go to the corners. All right, so welcome to the Science Corner. Today, I'm going to be talking about, well, I'm going to keep it on point. I'm going to keep it with the theme of the book. And that's another piece of advice I got from my lovely wife. She's like, the diversions are an interesting idea for a podcast, but it's kind of maybe not the best thing for you to start talking about torque converters out of context. I'm like, what? But torque converters are so interesting. And she's like, not to me. And so I'm not going to give up completely, right? Because it's a good suggestion and I can see her point. But part of what I want to do is add some diversity, add some interesting diversions to this podcast, because the books are cool, but also facts are cool. Trivia is cool. Random stuff is cool. So, but I'm going to try and keep from now on, kind of keep to the theme of the book where possible. So if I talk about a space book, I'll do some space thing for the Science Corner, and then maybe some space race thing for the History Corner, basically just like that. So on theme with the book, I'm talking about bacillus bacteria, which is, this is the type of bacteria that is mentioned as having caused the vampire disease. In fact, in the book, Robert Neville calls it the vampirus. I dub thee vampirus, is what he says after discovering it under the microscope. So basically, bacilla, they're rod-shaped bacteria, and they have like these hairs all over them, these flagella, and they use the flagella to propel themselves through fluid inside of your body or inside of wherever they're living. And that's how they get around, and then they latch onto the cells and eat them, kill them, cause problems, reproduce, all the good juicy stuff that bacteria do. But I wanted to talk specifically about one of the things that I didn't know that bacilla did, because I took some science classes, right, just like the rest of you probably did. I didn't know that bacillus transformed themselves into spores, though, which is a really, really cool thing that's mentioned in the book. And this part of the science was actually totally on point from what I can tell. During adverse environmental conditions, right? These bacillus bacteria, they turn themselves into spores they basically, I don't know the best way to describe it. They just crust over and become hard and become basically impervious to those conditions, right? They become resistant to heat and chemicals and sunlight, and they just lay there dormant. And one thing that they do is they invade dust particles. They live in the soil and they end up in dust. And that's how the vampirus virus in the book spread. It was in a dust, and there were these dust storms. And so all these vampirus bacilli spores were just sprayed all over the entire country all at once during these dust storms. And that's what caused the outbreak. And I thought, oh man, real bacillus actually do that. That is actually a legitimate vector. Which is crazy, right? That could actually happen. Fortunately for us, though, bacillus bacteria, some of them are harmful to humans and animals and plants and whatnot. They can cause like food poisoning, like a mild food poisoning. It's like they contaminate certain things. You find them on your skin a lot, right? And most of them are not. Most of them don't hurt humans, and that's because they've been around for a long, long, long time, and we've been around for a long, long, long time, and we've kind of learned to live together. There are some that are really, really bad for you, and the most famous one is Bacillus anthracus or anthracis, which causes anthrax. That's the anthrax one, right? So if you're interested in finding out what anthrax is, I don't want to say anthrax too many times on a podcast in case I end up on a government watch list, but check it out. Read into it. It's a scary one. It's deadly, very deadly. And it also lives as spores and can be transported as spores. I don't recommend it, though, because of aforementioned government watch lists. Don't really want to go down that rabbit hole, and Google with caution in that case. Anyways, that has been the Science Corner. Let's go over to the History Corner. All right, welcome to the History Corner. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of vampires. That's right. Vampires, as you know, are a human legend that is pretty prolific. It's been around for a long time, but the kind of modern vampire, the Dracula, right? The Bram Stoker version, that a lot of people think was inspired by Vlad the Impaler. Now, Vlad the Impaler was called the Impaler for all of the people that he impaled. Hundreds of thousands of people. He'd impale them on stakes. And if you think about impale, I don't want to get too grisly or gruesome here, but the way he impaled them was he sat them on a sharp stick and then pulled them down until they were a human popsicle, kind of a thing. That's what I mean by impale in this context. So he's a pretty bad dude. He was cruel. Drank blood, supposedly, roasted children, supposedly. Pretty evil dude. Amazing back-to-back world champion Halloween decorations on his lawn with with all the impaled people. That's terrible. Excuse me for saying that. Sorry for all of the impaled people out there. I know it's too soon for you, but something that's really cool about the word Dracula is it actually comes from Vlad the Impaler's last name. He was Vlad II Draculae, and Draculae means son of the dragon, which is cool. But that's where Dracula comes from. This guy, this bad dude, Vlad the Impaler. If you're interested, read more about that. I have certainly been interested in the Wikipedia page that I found on it. Very, very cool, very neat. Get into it. Enjoy. This has been the History Corner. Let's go over to the Random Corner. Nope, sorry, the Trivia Corner. All right, so we're in the Trivia Corner. And I think the best way to start off is with a lawyer joke. I know I missed that on the last episode. Please forgive me. I'll try to include them in the future going forward. But I got a good one. Here we go. What is the difference between a vampire and a lawyer? One is a monstrous blood-sucking parasite, and the other can turn into a bat. But okay, there's our lawyer joke. So the piece of trivia for today was okay. So I found this on a website. This was just random facts about vampires as I was reading about vampires. The way that they used to try and find vampires. So supposedly these vampires that go out at night cause problems and then come back to their own grave and cover it up. And I guess the grave would not look disturbed or whatever. But one way that people would try to find a vampire was to get a black stallion and put a virgin boy on top of the black stallion and then lead the black stallion with virgin boy on top of it around the graveyard. And then supposedly the horse would get freaked out by the grave of whoever the vampire was. And then you could dig them up and drive a stake through their heart. That was the idea. It sounds, I'm not going to lie, it sounds pretty scientific. You can definitely see why the virgin boy has to be involved. It might only seem like he's just sitting on the horse and that the horse is the one who decides where the vampire is, but the virgin boy plays a critical role in there. So, and if you have any common sense, I think you can definitely tell what that is. No explanation required, purely scientific. Anyways, this has been the Trivia Corner. Let's head back to the main review. All right. Now I got to talk about the things that I didn't like about the book. And as I said before, not really any. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I loved this book. There's not really anything that I could say that I didn't like about it. It was a little, I guess it was a little heavy on the sexual innuendo at times. So if you're sensitive to that, maybe this book is not for you. He's a young man. He's a young buck in the prime of his life. 30. I think he starts out around 30 something years old. early 30s. That feels young to me now since I'm turning 30 in 3 days. But yeah, he's a young dude. He's got, natural biological inclinations, and he's alone in the world and no outlet for those. So, he's got certain thoughts and feelings and attitudes towards the vampire women. And those are maybe not super PC these days. So there's that aspect of it that I think the book might have done without. But it contributes to kind of his sense of despair and his overall loneliness, and that's a factor. So I'm not going to hold it against the book too much there. But yeah, that's basically it. I know I said that I loved the pacing earlier, but I actually found myself wanting more of this book. Like, it was almost too fast. Like, it went by so quickly. Like I said, I read it in one day and I got everything out of it. I never missed a word. I never missed a beat on the book. It was so interesting from start to finish. But I'm like, oh man, like, what does he do? Or like, how does he deal with this problem? Or how does he, where does he get his food? Where does he, I had questions. I had questions about the world that I could have, that I would have enjoyed learning more about. So if anything, this book almost went by too fast. But I feel that way about any book after I've loved it and it's over. So without further ado, let's jump into my patented, one of a kind, super special, amazing, wonderful ratings of the bells. Any suggestions for better names for that would be welcome. But anyways, here's the bell thingy that I do to say how much I like the book. That's right. 5 stars, 5 bell things, and some toot toot horns, and some ding 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 at the end. I don't know. 5 things, 5 bells of wonder. I don't know. I love that though. The book was good. I'm giving it 5 bells, and yeah. The reason is because it was amazing. I don't know what else you want me to say about it. I've already said that all the things that I want to say about it. The book freaking rocked. You got to get it. You have to get it soon. You have to read it. You have to have it be part of your life. The moral of the story was very compelling. The plight, the dark depths that he kind of has to deal with, and then like his rising from those depths. The whole thing was really, really cool. And then the end is not a happy one, right? But he has this moment of self-reflection that makes you think. And I love books that make me think, and you love books that make you think. And so get this book, enjoy it, read it, make it part of your life. Okay. I think that's it. Let's go ahead and wrap up the podcast. Let me leave you with this parting thought though. And I'm trying to stay on theme. Like I said, I'm on brand for this episode. And that ending, like I said, has messed with my head. So I turned to the Stoics, to see what they would have to say about these types of things. And so this is from Epictetus, who was a Stoic writer, philosopher, propounder of Stoic thoughts from ye olden days. And he says, first off, don't let the force of the impression carry you away. Say to it, hold up a bit and let me see who you are and where you are from. Let me put you to the test. And I liked how this kind of jived with the theme of the book, at least the ending, kind of like when Robert Neville, when he realizes that he's the monster to these people, right? He has this impression that he's the last human and that he's doing what he has to do to survive, and they're the monsters. But maybe if he had held up a bit, maybe if he had, as Epictetus said, hold up a bit and let me see who you are and where you're from. Let me put you to the test. Maybe if he had thought a little bit, maybe if he'd been a little bit more careful, maybe if he had recognized, because there were clues all throughout that these people were human and that they were afraid and that they were sentient creatures. Yes, in fairness, they did want to drink his blood, and that was a giveaway. The book kind of splits living. So one thing I forgot to mention, and I'm just going to throw it in like a live grenade here at the end of the podcast. There's a difference between living and dead vampires. I forgot to. That's my bad. My bad, everyone. So there are dead people who died and then they came back as vampires. Those are mindless, soulless creatures, fiends that are there to drink blood. But then there are living people who contracted the disease and they're still alive, but they are vampires. They have the vampirus bacteria. So they're the sentient living ones. And if the main character, if Robert Neville, if he had acknowledged that some of them were different and that some of them were trying to talk to them and some of them seemed to have feelings and some of them were afraid when he was tormenting them and some of them, they had very, very human characteristics. If he had acknowledged that and listened to that, he would not have become the monster from their nightmares. And they might have been able to live in peace. So don't be hasty when you're don't let the force of the impression carry you away. Hold up, put it to the test, be reasonable, examine things from the other person's perspective, and see what kind of a distance you can cover to make something happen, to bridge a divide, to keep yourself, I guess, in line with the person across the table from you, right? If there's if you have a bad impression, give a second chance, right? There's that saying, you never get a second chance at a first impression. Start giving second chances at first impressions, right? Someone might not be having their best day. And we don't all deserve to be scrutinized on our worst day and have that be what people think about us for the rest of our lives, right? We don't all deserve to be scrutinized by our worst attribute. And that's a habit that we have, right? Like we will hold ourselves, we'll give ample grace for ourselves and our weaknesses and expect people to treat us based off of our good attributes, but then we'll hold somebody else's worst attribute on their worst day against them. Don't do that. Don't be that guy or girl or, whatever. Don't be that human or vampire or, whatever. Anyways, podcast is done. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you liked it, please share it. This is a labor of love. I do it because I love the books. I do it because I want you guys to have the books in your life. And as I said, I've been really, really pleased with the responses so far. Even though this is the first episode technically that I've been releasing, I got a lot of downloads on those other episodes. So thank you so much. Please keep sharing it. Please keep passing it along to people who could find it useful or entertaining or anything. And have a good day. You deserve it. Bye.